2011 was a turbulent year around the world and here at the United Nations. There were revolutions in Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya, and the European debt crisis shook the markets. As the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon enters his second fifth-year term, we will ask him about the difficult issues that will face the United Nations in 2012 and what role the UN will play in nuclear defiance in Iran, in an uncertain transition in North Korea, and a brutal crackdown in Syria. I'm Pamela Falk for CBS News at UN headquarters in New York. Mr. Secretary General, may we start with the country you know best, South Korea. You spent a career in foreign service. There had been some hope after the transition to Kim Jong Un that there would be the opportunity, at least, for better relations. But now there have been some comments by North Korea about puppets and not such nice comments. What do you think the prospects for peace are between North and South Korea?
I'm also concerned by such strong rhetoric, but I believe that politics are never static. It's constantly evolving. There may be ups and downs, but I'm hopeful and optimistic that there will be an opportunity that the parties concerned, particularly South and North Koreans, will be able to discuss their future through exchanges and cooperation through dialogue. And United Nations is ready to provide whatever assistance and facilitation as appropriate.
Now, you said in your New Year's message that you will be unsparing in your help for this peace. Do you see the North and South Korea uniting in any time soon? You know this area, it's so obviously personal to you. Do you see a unification?
As Secretary General of the United Nations, as one of the Korean citizens, I'm committed to do whatever I can for the peace and prosperity and eventual reunification. Reunification is an ardent aspiration of 70 million Korean people. Therefore, I'm optimistic that one day, sure, we'll have reunification. For that, we need to be patient. We should not be pushed around by any situations or negative rhetorics. We have to be patient and move on through a dialogue.
Do you think any kind of dialogue could lead to North Korea giving up its nuclear weapons at this point?
There was a joint statement by the six-party talks whereby North Korea has agreed to abandon all nuclear facilities. And there was a very historic agreement to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. It's a matter of implementation. It requires a political will. For that possible, all the stakeholders, concerned parties, they have to fully cooperate and try to convince DPRK authorities to abandon nuclear programs. For that, continuous dialogue with patience will be very much important.
Now, we met at CBS with the North Korean ambassador, Sin Sun-ho, who did say that agreement, which included aid to North Korea, was violated by the United States, actually, that the aid wasn't forthcoming. Do you think the aid, the food program that's now in the works, can go forward?
As the Secretary General of the United Nations, I'm particularly concerned about the humanitarian situation, very dire humanitarian situation, particularly young people, infants and children are suffering from famine. That's why we have been trying to mobilize humanitarian assistance. There have been some political consideration situations whereby the countries concerned, particularly the United States and the Republic of Korea, they have been withholding their massive economic cooperation. But with all the dialogue and some breakthrough in the future coming, I hope the situation will improve. we must see improved relations between South and North Korea. And peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula has very important regional implications.
And there have been secretaries general in the past. Dag Hammarskjöld was one who used his personal diplomacy in the Suez Canal crisis. Do you foresee going to Pyongyang or being a personal diplomat in the reunification?
As a matter of principle, I have publicly stated that I'm ready to provide my own efforts and contribution as appropriate whenever opportunity arises. But that should also be considered with some expected good results. Yeah.
And do you expect that they might issue an invitation? That was what would have to come first.
We will have to see. The North Korean leader just passed away last month, and they are now in the process of a transition. We have to very closely, carefully monitor the situation. Only then we will be able to see some clearer picture what will be ahead.
And you, obviously, in your capacity as Secretary General, wouldn't have an opinion, but in your personal capacity as South Korean national, do you have an opinion of the new leader of North Korea?
I have never met him. All indication seem to suggest that he's being recognized as the leader of North Korea. But all this have to be seen and monitored very closely what will come. But most important imperative at this time is that we need to see a stability on the Korean Peninsula. We need to see a stable situation in DPRK too.
And do you think it is now? People are a little bit worried with a 20-something-year-old with nuclear weapons, and theoretically people say he has a bit of a temper. Do you see it as safe?
We will have to see how situation will evolve. All concerned parties, I would urge them to be patient and to coordinate with stakeholders so that there will be a peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. That's very important. As I said all the times, peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula has very important regional implications. Yeah.
All right, turning to Syria. 5,000 people have been killed. It's a very difficult situation. You yourself have said this has to stop. Something has to change. What can change when there seems to be inaction on the Security Council side? Do you think Bashar al-Assad should go?
I'm seriously concerned about what has happening in Syria, where more than 5,000 have been killed by the authorities of Syria. At this time, I'm very closely coordinating and working together with the League of Arab States. It was encouraging that the monitoring team of League of Arab States for the first time was dispatched, and it was very important that this mission should have been conducted with the credibility and transparent manner. We are waiting for the assessment of their mission, and I am in the very closely following the situation. What is most important at this time, that President Assad must stop killing his people. It is totally unacceptable that even during the visit of monitoring team of League of Arab States, they have been killing people. This is not acceptable. He has to stop, and he has to listen to the aspiration of his own people.
Now, there has been some criticism of the League of Arab States monitors, one being a Sudanese general, and that they may be too close to the government. And they've also pretty much had to go because the killing kept going on. Without that, what can the UN do? Can the UN Security Council act?
UN should speak and act in a coherent manner. And I have discussed this matter with the Security Council, and I have been closely coordinating with the League of Arab States. I'm very much appreciative of League of Arab States' efforts to, first of all, stop further bloodshed and protect the human lives. But we have not been able to protect the human lives. We will continue to pressure Syrian authorities, and I'm urging again President Assad to keep his promise and agreement with the League of Arab States to take a bold reform measures.
Now, Navi Pillay, your Human Rights Commissioner, High Commissioner, did say that they should be there may be crimes against humanity, and others have called on the UN Security Council to refer this to the ICC. Do you think Russia is? Why is Russia blocking this?
Well, I cannot speak for the Russian government. I'm speaking only for United Nations. That is why I have conveyed the report of International Commission of Inquiry to both the Security Council and the United Nations General Assembly for their necessary action. I do hope that the UN will be able to take coherent and concrete measure to prevent the further losses of human lives.
We're watching this scene unfold. And you received praise from around the world for being very outspoken in your first term during the revolutions of Egypt and Tunisia and Libya. And yet there was a protest last week that unfortunately had a sign that said Bashar al-Assad kills while Ban Ki-moon sleeps. And I'm sorry to convey that, but that's what, is there something you can personally do if the UN Security Council won't?
I have been trying my best. I have been speaking to President Assad directly, personally, and I have been speaking out publicly that he should stop killing people. And that is why I have been speaking out as strongly as possible. Unfortunately, he has not heeded to the calls of international community, including the United Nations and myself and League of Arab States. I will continue to exert all possible means. United Nations is ready to provide again assistance to League of Arab States.
All right, now just turning to Libya for a moment, you defended the action on implementing the no-fly zone, and Russia's been a little critical of that support because they felt the Libya mandate went too far. You don't feel that way. Could you describe how you feel Libya at the UN action on Libya helped?
United Nations has taken very important and decisive action to protect the human lives in Libya by adopting Security Council Resolution 1973. This is a very historic one. And I have been constantly calling and urging the all military leaders to protect the human lives. This has been consistent policy, even in Afghanistan. I have been urging them to pay utmost efforts and caution to protect the human lives.
All right, two more areas of the world. Iran, there's a showdown that seems to be taking place in the Strait of Hormuz because of a retaliation by the Iranians saying that if there are restrictions on their central bank, which the U.S. is putting into effect, and the UN obviously has sanctions. What would the UN do? What would you do? It's sort of similar to the Suez Canal if the Iranians close the Strait of Hormuz.
I'm closely following the development in Hormuz Strait. It is important at this time the all concerned parties try to diffuse the tension and try to resolve all the issues through dialogue. At the same time, I'm most concerned by a recent IAEA report, which indicate that there is a possibility of military dimension on Iranian nuclear activities. It is important, again, for Iranian authorities to fully comply with relevant Security Council resolution. Onus is on them to prove the nature of peaceful uses of nuclear activities, programs of them. At the same time, I would urge again that the E3+3 dialogue with Iran should also be continued.
The negotiations.
Yes, that's right.
And on the Middle East, there seemed to be some light shed this week with meetings of the quartet and direct meetings. But you've been skeptical in the past about especially the Israeli settlements. Can you say where you think it's going now?
I'm encouraged that the two parties have met in Amman, and I appreciate the initiative of His Majesty King Abdullah of Jordan and Foreign Minister Jude. And I have been speaking with Egyptian, Jordanian leaders, and I commended their facilitating role. I am going to continue to work with the leaders in the region, and I have a plan of visiting the region in the near future to discuss all these issues and to accelerate this process. It is important that parties should build upon what they have been discussing for Middle East peace process.
All right, final question is just, you received overwhelming support in election for a second term. Who would you say is your role model as perhaps the diplomat you respect most, or a Secretary General who you respect most?
You see, last year we observed the 50th anniversary of untimely, tragic passing of former Secretary General. I visited his gravesite, and he has been my role model, in fact. And I'm ready to devote all my time and energy to work for the peace and stability and development and human rights. As I'm just continuing my second term as a Secretary General, I am very much humbled to carry on this one. There are still so many billions of people who are suffering from abject poverty and disease, preventable diseases. And there are still many conflicts still taking place, as we see in South Sudan. And the people are still suffering from abuses by the authoritarian rules, as we have seen in the Middle East. There are so many areas people are still looking to the United Nations. Whenever I'm thinking about them, I cannot but be humbled. We have to, first of all, help these people in transition toward the democracy. And there is a great imperative for 21st century, realizing the sustainable development, lifting billions of people out of poverty, and also protecting this planet Earth in an environmentally sustainable way. And that is why we have to make a Rio Plus 20 summit meeting in June a great success. This is an imperative for humanity. And there is great efforts to be made on prevention, man-made and natural disasters. And we have to work for more to promote the gender empowerment and to provide decent jobs to many youth. And there is, again, core responsibility of the United Nations is to keep this world more peaceful and secured. Those are some of my priorities as I have just begun my second term.
And I think a lot of people have you to thank for all this progress in those areas. Mr. Secretary General, thank you very much for sharing your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.